Hi, friends. I hope you're staying safe. So much has changed since I sent the rough cut of this episode to Malika back in early March. Shortly after, on March 2nd, I entered a remote writer's retreat in the woods of Illinois, thinking I was just leaving the ordinary world for a few weeks and that everything would be the same when I returned. Of course, when I emerged on March 19th, nothing was the same. Like many of you, I've been inside ever since. I've become accustomed to wearing masks and gloves, to washing my food after I come back from the grocery store, to washing everything. I've been checking in with friends and family, clients and students via Zoom, which has been strangely intimate and reassuring. I've watched 4 friends struggle to bury their parents who have passed from corona or pneumonia. I've been asked to facilitate my first Zoom Shiva service, and while I'm honored, my heart is breaking. I'm telling you this because even though our world has changed, and maybe the world as we know it has ended, I believe more than ever that the stories we tell matter. The experiences we have are still our best information about who we are. They determine how we live our lives, right now, and if we're lucky, in the future. So I'll continue the Extraordinary Project as long as I can, but I want to thank you for listening. I hope it helps. Welcome to the Extraordinary Project, Season 2, Episode 3. I'm Suzanne Clores. This episode, Night Terrors and Protecting the Mind from Their Effects. Let me clear something up right away. I don't have plans to start working as a medium. I realized in the last episode it was starting to sound like I was seeing out-of-body beings in the night, which I was. So I want to start there, because it's easy to jump to conclusions. But just because you see disturbing energies doesn't automatically mean that talking to dead people is your destiny. If you're just catching up, the story is I had gone to England last summer to find out more about the history of spiritualism, which is the religion that believes the dead are accessible to the living. But simultaneously, and maybe not by coincidence, I was suffering from a sleep disorder known as sleep paralysis, also known as night terrors. There are 2 ways to go about this next bit of information. I'm going to start with the more familiar textbook way. If you look up the phrase night terrors on the internet, you'll find link after link to articles about sleep disorders, from the Mayo Clinic, from the American Academy of Sleep Medicine, from the British Psychological Society, and they all agree on the following: that night terrors come when the mind is conscious but the body is asleep. It's a REM-related parasomnia, a mechanical disconnect that causes the body to panic and hallucinate. That medical description bears no resemblance to the experience of these episodes. Difficulty breathing, inability to move one's limbs or head, feelings of dread, acute anxiety, feeling like you're lifting up or falling down a shaft, spinning, the sounds of bells, mechanical sounds, whispers, dialogue, the feeling of being touched or held or crushed, and of course, visual hallucinations of a presence. A monster, a sinister creature that means you harm, a certainty that you are not safe, not in the regular world anymore, that world is gone and will never return. I got a notebook, a night terror notebook, and filled it over the course of a year every time I had one. I found that this notebook gave me comfort. It created a log of symptoms and experiences that are hard to validate in the light of day. It became a primary source document of all the creatures who disappeared once the sun rose. I'll read a few entries in that journal. 9/11/2018. This is the 3rd night in a row that I awoke screaming because I saw a figure, the outline, the shape, the arms and legs of a figure. I forgot about last night and the night before, but tonight before I fell asleep I almost had a glimpse of it. Now I can't recall the stupid thing, but it was the arms and the legs of a large figure, over me or on me. I saw it and screamed myself awake, and only then did I remember that I did the same thing for the last 2 nights. If I think about it, it's hard for me to remember that particular episode, But when I see the words on the page, in my own handwriting, usually scribbled in the early morning before the world fades in, the images come flooding back. Here's another one. Last night, I knew the fall would be a tumultuous walk into beasts. I did not want to drift off slowly. My body was exhausted from the night before. I kept jerking awake each time I fell to sleep. It is exhausting to drop to sleep and then in the next breath jerk awake. It almost gives a case of the bends. Finally, I succumb and drop hard. And in a flash, a man being, young, blonde, vacant-looking, with long forearms, dove at my legs and hips, grabbed my lower body. I kicked hard and pushed my arms at him, sucked in my breath. This is the way I've come to learn to fight them off. You have to kick them and push them at the same time. You have to surprise them. Sometimes I think they come if I have peanut butter or toast or a glass of wine too close to bed. In fact, my evenings have become prevention periods and drills rather than relaxed time. If I don't exercise enough to the point of exhaustion, I'll be stuck in this gate between sleep and wake for half the night. And that is like walking into the forest naked. There are other entries from this same time period. One with a brown-skinned woman standing in front of me with the lower part of her face missing from some kind of war or torture. Another time, a guy sitting in an armchair, as though across from a therapist, with long, bushy nose hairs, talking incessantly about his life. As time went on, I found the people in the terrors weren't trying to hurt me. It was more like they wanted me to see them. They wanted to be acknowledged. Even if I wanted to acknowledge them, though, I couldn't do it. My body was too scared. So I started to look for solutions. The solutions I found online were kind of tepid. Don't eat big meals. Try to limit your stress. Maybe sleep with a weighted blanket. Take a Klonopin or an Ambien. See a doctor to make sure you don't have narcolepsy, which is life-threatening. In other words, just try stuff, but don't worry about it. Up to 50% of the population will experience a sleep paralysis just once. So that's a lot of people having a single incident. But between 3 and 6% will experience them more chronically. I was curious about the small percentage, and I spoke with a friend who had been having night terrors, along with her brother and father, for more than 20 years, which made me wonder, if you live with an anomaly for 2 decades, is it still an anomaly? This is Vanessa.
Sometimes it's just a shadowy figure, and sometimes it's more specific. I think the most common one is just, I'll think I see someone standing over my bed. I remember I was on a business trip in Tokyo. The night terror was that there was like a dragon-y creature swooping down on me when I was actually at a boyfriend's house. And it was an elderly couple wearing sweaters, and they were holding a laundry basket together, and they walked in the doorway. And I screamed at them, and they screamed back. Recently, John was sleeping in the other room. I leapt out of bed to get up and get help from him. And then I'm standing in his room where I've woken him up, and I start trying to describe to him what I just saw. And I realize the thing that I'm describing is ridiculous and not likely to be true. And he's like, is there someone in your room or not? Do I need to go fight a burglar or not? The way that it works is there's sort of a split second where you think it's real, and then there's another fraction of a second where you think, no, this time it's just a night terror, and then the next thought is no, this time it is real, and there's someone in my room and they're going to kill me. I think some of mine sometimes are things that shouldn't be scary but still are scary because it's in your room at night when no one is supposed to be there. A little kid in your room standing by your bed looking at you. And of course I have a little kid, and I look at little kids all day, so it makes sense that that's what I'm seeing at night also, but it's still terrifying because it's some little person in your room who isn't supposed to be there. And you have a moment of how did they get in? What's going on? I think I started having them in my early 20s. And so I think that when I was first having them, they didn't know what they were. And I thought that I was losing my mind, frankly. Like I was really worried that maybe I had gone crazy or was going crazy or would be crazy soon. I mean, it's pure terror. Like it's the way you see it in horror movies. Well, you worry that you're going to have a heart attack because your heart is pounding so hard. It's not a feeling that I think most people have. When I was in graduate school and trying to write my thesis, I was having them like every night. And there was some flyer up, some kind of sleep analysis or sleep study or something like that. And I called them and she seemed really excited about it. And then when I told her what kind of graduate school program I was in, she's like, "Oh, and you're an artist." I think she actually said, "Bless your heart." Not only did I not follow up, I have never spoken to any professional again. You just have to get out of that moment of being scared, I think. A lot of times I'll like get up and get a drink of water or something like that. But for the most part, I can settle back down and just kind of let it roll. I mean, it's bothersome. It makes the explanation of it's like REM cycle sleep disorder, your eyelids flutter open, your sleeping brain makes sense out of something ordinary in a dreamlike way. Like that explanation is one that I can make sense of myself. And so that's what I tend to go with. I think in the middle of the night, if you asked me what I thought, I don't think I'd be very sure about it. And I think about the fact that my brother has it and my dad has it, what our ancestors must have thought of it. They absolutely must have thought they were seeing ghosts. Like, I don't know how you could not think that.
And I think there's something inherently soothing about knowing your condition is shared by others in your family. For better or worse, anything my family suffers suddenly becomes endurable. They cope, and so can I. And sure, I'll accept the idea that my chemistry could be off, lack of dopamine or too much of something else. But that means blood tests, sleep tests, supplements, probably drugs, and a commitment to the idea that something within me was broken and needed fixing. What if nothing was broken? What if I was just differently attuned? Soon after I talked to Vanessa, I started meeting more people who disclosed that they too suffered from night terrors. I met Tyler at a Christmas party at an editing house in downtown Chicago. And when I brought up casually that I was researching night terrors, Tyler said, "Oh, I've had those." He volunteered to tell me about the 2 instances in his life that absolutely terrified him.
We had just bought a condo, so we were moving in August of 2018. That was on my mind. That was really stressing me out. And then simultaneously, I was in the process of getting a wedding ring designed. That was really stressing me out too. And then my grandmother actually was having health problems too, and she lives in Wisconsin. It's a long story, but I'm like kind of her medical power of attorney too, so I was getting phone calls all the time. And but yeah, I came home late from work, and I did eat dinner pretty late, which is typical for me. I remember, feeling like what I thought was waking up, and I was able to make out every detail of my room, seeing my nightstand and, seeing all the furniture in the room very vividly, so I knew my eyes were open. I remember an enormous weight on my chest and on my head, and there was something telling me part of me in my brain, I was like, if I lift my head and if I look in that corner, there's going to be someone standing there. And it was automatic. It wasn't even something I questioned. It was just something I knew. So I was like, I have to lift my head. I felt like there were just like a ton of cinder blocks tying my head down and pushing on my chest. But I looked up, and then sure enough, there was a genderless kind of entity. There was a figure standing in the corner that was like horrifying. A very still, almost draped figure. I couldn't make out a lot of details with it, but in my mind, I was awake, so I, thought there was an intruder. Really, the fear was like something I've never experienced before, and I just thought someone had broken into the house. And of course, there was no entity there. There was no figure. I think I just chalked it up to like a bad dream, or I just thought I was having a nightmare. And I really didn't think much of it until it was about, I'd say maybe 3 weeks or like a month later, it happened again. I felt the same weight, the same dread. I was awake. I could absorb every little detail of the room, same thing.
This is a traditional night terror story, once or twice, caused by extreme stress at work or because of moving. Sounds reasonable, except a funny thing happened after Tyler told me this story, which he hadn't really shared with too many people before. He remembered another incident, one that lasted his entire childhood, anytime he slept at his father's house.
I was 16, and my dad and his wife were living out in Madison, Wisconsin. In their house, it was a house I think was built in the 50s. The top floor where all the bedrooms were was kind of like a big L-shaped hallway. So my grandma had a bedroom like towards the entrance to that hallway, and then my dad and stepmom had a room right next to hers. And then way down the hall, you do like a sharp 90-degree left, and then go all the way down to the end of that hall, so really far away from everybody, was my guest bedroom that I would stay in when I was there. And my stepmom had this awful like Victorian furniture. And I remember as a child, that room terrified me. I absolutely hated it. Every single time I would go to bed there, I was dreading like bedtime. I remember looking at the clock like, oh my God, I have to go back to bed. Like, I hated going to bed in that house. So I never really said much about it, but there were so many times as a child I would be like pouring sweat, and I felt like someone was in the room with me, and I would just, shake and eventually fall asleep. And I hadn't felt that in a while. I was getting older, and for some reason there was one night where I had this feeling again like I did when I was 12, terrified. And as a 16-year-old boy, I was like, well, why am I feeling this again? Like, what the hell is going on? But it was the same thing. It was like a cold sweat. There was someone in the room with me, something awful. And, I basically just shut my eyes really, really tight and just forced myself to fall asleep. And it took a long time, but I eventually did, wake up. I instantly realized I was not laying on the bed. I was somewhere else. And I was really, really confused and disoriented. And I looked and I was on the floor of my grandmother's bedroom. Way on the other, way down the hallway. And I think my grandma was doing dishes. And I asked her, why was I on the floor of your bed? And she was like, oh, you don't remember anything from last night? And I was like, no, I really don't. And she's like, yeah, you came in there and laid on the floor and I asked you what you were doing. And you said, I have to sleep in here tonight. I can't be in that other room because she won't stop staring at me. I did not like that room. And then after that sealed the deal.
So Tyler's story led me to the next logical question, the question that I started with. Is it possible that terrors in the night are not always in your head? Is it possible that they are actually like energies in the room, and that some sensitive people are prone to seeing these energies? Whether it's due to stress or digestive upset, vitamin or mineral deficiencies, or genetics, are we not hallucinating the night terrors? Are they objectively there? I needed help. I was so tired, and every time I tried to sleep, I would stress about what I might see. I finally caved in and got blood work done, found I was iron deficient, vitamin D deficient, and had a lot of other fluctuations. So for the record, I did take my sleep health seriously. I followed traditional medical suggestions. I managed everything with supplements, and for a couple of months, things died down, but didn't entirely disappear. So I called in a different type of therapist.
I am Garrett Walters, and I am a clairvoyant healer and teacher. I have clients all over the world. I see about 75% of my clients over the phone and about 25% in person. Probably fully a third of my clients are psychiatrists, psychotherapists, counselors of one form or another. And the advantage that I have is that what I communicate doesn't have to make intellectual sense.
Energy healing is a popular modality right now, almost a fad, that on the surface raises more questions than it answers. Most people I know look at me blankly when I tell them I work with an energy healer over the phone. What does he say? What does he do? How does he work with your energy from a distance? And what energy?
My job is to look at you as spirit, and then to look at those places where your energy has become stuck and to help you to let it go.
Since Western medicine doesn't really believe that the body has an energetic system, it's hard for us to imagine energy healing is even real. It's qi in China and Japan, prana in India, mana in Hawaiian mythology, Reiki in Tibet. The shared understanding among all energy practitioners is that energy exists inside the body and within all living things, that it can be built, balanced, and cleared. I came to Garrett by referral, and when I told him about my concerns, that night terrors were a signal that I was losing my mind or was doomed to a life of bad, disturbed sleep, he laughed. To a clairvoyant healer, you are never really doomed. You might be in pain, but you aren't doomed.
Most of my clients are at least as hungry to be heard by someone who understands the experience that they have had as a function of being very sensitive to energy. I tend to think of being sensitive to energy as something akin to having very sensitive hearing. If you've got really excellent ears, it can be very difficult to be in a very noisy place. For people who are sensitive to energy, they are constantly being bombarded by the thoughts, fears, expectations, aspirations, and the chaos of the people around them.
I had been working with Garrett for a while, so you would think it would be easy to share the night terror particulars. He is as kind as he sounds, and equally imposing in appearance. When we talk on the phone, I am aware that I am talking to a gentle giant, one with decades of energy healing skills. But I was so self-conscious, and a little embarrassed, frankly, to report what I saw, worried that this incident might be the thing that finally freaks Garrett out. I woke up, scared, saw my husband sleeping beside me. Something was wrong in the room. I looked up, and in the corner of the ceiling were two figures sitting in an invisible box. They were transparent, but I saw outlines of their bodies, their clothing, their robes, their crowns. This is going to sound ridiculous, but they looked like low-level kings. They knew I could see them, and that I was seeing evidence of a world I wasn't supposed to see. They thought this was absolutely hilarious. Somehow, I had picked up my phone and made a voice memo describing them. Of course, that memo is gone now, but it woke my husband, and as I was telling him about the beings, pointing them out, they slowly faded away. I wish I still had the recording, but maybe it's better that I don't.
The problem is that everyone is psychic, but because we tend to teach our children that energy isn't real, that the things that go bump in the night are their imagination, children learn very quickly to first pretend that they don't see what they see, and then over time they learn to not see.
In my session with Garrett, he could actually see the remnants of the beings. I don't know how. I actually started to feel better as he worked in a way that's hard to describe. A little more calm, a little less heightened, a lot more clear and grounded. Part of it has to do with the fact that I was being validated. Not only could Garrett describe these low-level kings in detail, but he could get rid of them. I haven't seen them or any nefarious intruders since. Didn't that count for something? For the record, he regularly recognizes out-of-body beings in all of his clients. They are a common nuisance in the world of energy healing.
It's funny, there are a lot of New Agey kind of people who think that any out-of-body being is your guide and that you should defer to their greater spiritual insight and authority. And I think that's nonsense. There are literally billions of beings out there in the world, and they don't understand the concept of respect for space. A big part of what we teach is to help people see the difference between what is their energy and what is not their energy. I didn't have too much trouble with night terrors, or at least not as an adult, but I have spent a lot of the last 40 years clearing pain from my family. It's the same phenomena. It doesn't matter whether it's an in-body being or an out-of-body being. I don't think there are good beings or bad beings. I think there are beings that respect space, and there are beings that don't.
When I circle back to the question of how is this type of energy visible and changeable, he helpfully pointed out this. Before germ theory was developed, people would have thought you were crazy if you claimed that little invisible bugs were making us sick. But then the microscope came along, and the discovery of microorganisms and penicillin, and now our entire medical system is built upon the truth that little bugs were making us sick. Maybe it's only a matter of time before we develop a new lens that recognizes what Garrett and thousands of other energy workers have been doing for a long time. Next time on The Extraordinary Project. The Extraordinary Project was created by me, Suzanne Clores, audio engineering and sound design by Malika Gumpangam, and musical compositions by David Weiner. If you like The Extraordinary Project, tell all your friends, and you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Suzanne S. Clores, or on Facebook at Suzanne Clores' The Extraordinary Project. Until next time.